The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for joining us today to learn about risky play and its many benefits to children. The Active Kids would like to welcome our guest speaker, Morgan Liechter-Saxby from Pop-Up Adventure Play, to help us all learn about this topic. Morgan is a play worker and researcher who has worked in institutions and grassroots initiatives to support play around the world. She is co-author of the New Adventure Playground Movement, How Communities Across the U.S. Are Returning Risk and Play to Childhood. She's also a founding member of Pop-Up Adventure Playground and is currently working towards a PhD in playwork. She blogs occasionally at playeverything.wordpress.com. Please help me welcome Morgan Liechter-Saxby.
Hello, Richard. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Evie, for putting all this together. These are great slides, and I'm very excited to be a part of it. So let's get going. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about risky play, it's really worth taking a step back and looking first at what we mean by play. And playwork has a definition of play that we use. It's not perfect, but it is very useful, as it being a process that is freely chosen, personally directed, and intrinsically motivated. And that last part is really important when we're talking specifically about risky play, because I want to emphasize right from the beginning that we're not talking about putting children in danger or making them face their fears or any of that. What we're talking about is creating environments that allow them to take the risks that they choose and create for themselves. The things that they're motivated to do, even if it's a little bit scary. And if we think about it, there's that kind of bargain being made all the way through life. We're constantly trying to decide, even as adults, whether something is worth the potential risk. And being able to do that, to assess risks that you're motivated to take, is a really great thing for children to be able to do in their play, where it's a safe chance for them to test that out, to do a little bit of the trial and error. So next slide, please. We also want to be very careful and distinguish between risk and hazard, even though those two words get used pretty interchangeably by adults. So a risk is something that a child can see and navigate themselves, and a hazard is something they can't. So for example, with good old-fashioned tree climbing, a child can have that sense of being high up and climbing and relying on their own muscles. And that's why they're doing it, right? That's the thrill. But if we can see from beneath that that branch is rotten through, then that's a hazard, because that's something that they're not taking into account. Another example might be if we're bringing things to roll down a hill and the children are doing that, if they don't know that there's broken glass, then that's our responsibility, right? That's a hazard. And our job is always to remove those hazards so that a place is a safe one for children to take risk in. Next slide, please. And there's so much literature around the benefits of risky play, around what children are gaining through these experiences. And don't worry, I won't read them all out here, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the diverse benefits of that. The physical and social benefits, the mental development, spiritual development as well, because I think children have a lot of curiosities around risk and safety and danger that we don't necessarily talk about. But they know that these things happen, and they're curious, and they want to know not just what they're capable of, but what they can survive. So it's quite a deep process that they're undertaking, even if on the outside it looks often quite silly, which is why we take it very seriously. So next slide, please. And risky play can take all sorts of different forms, and some of these will be very familiar to anyone who works with children or maybe has experience of having been a child. the chance to get up high is really important. And I think that even if there's just a big hill in the playground and no particular danger of being up there, right? There's that king of the hill feeling. And the same is true when it comes to trees or the equipment or anything else. It can feel exhilarating. And the same is true with high speed. Children seek out or try to create these opportunities all the time. But adults very often, and often without very much consideration, just shut it down because we get scared. So what this presentation really is about, what all of our professional development around risky play is to allow us to have some context for what we're seeing so that we can respond and rather than react to what we see. So that we can remember that our being freaked out is a piece of information, but not necessarily the whole story. And I think that that particularly comes into play with this one, with rough and tumble, because I see a lot of professionals get really alarmed as soon as rough and tumble starts. But there's a big difference between fighting and play fighting. And play fighting is incredibly pro-social. If you think about all of the very nuanced interactions that are happening between two children wrestling, you know, all of that complex negotiation around, is this too hard? Is this good? Are we still friends? Oh, I'm sorry, I went a bit too hard. Am I forgiven? This is really fundamental stuff. And for a lot of children, this is their primary method of learning those social boundaries and of testing and reinforcing the trust of their friendships. So it's pretty great. Next slide, please. And these two, so dangerous tools or elements. My background is from the adventure playground movement, so I'm used to seeing children with hammers and nails. And it's incredible what they can do when they have those skills, when they're, you know, when they have that experience. But as we're going to talk about in later slides, you don't go straight to that. You don't, as my friend Susanna says, you don't go from zero to chainsaw. So don't worry, that's not what we're advocating. But we are saying that it's important to give children real objects, you know, not just small plastic versions of things, but the actual things themselves. And it's also important to try and find ways to let them feel that they're away from us, if that's what they're seeking. It doesn't have to be, you know, children heading out of sight and off to the horizon, but perhaps forts or den making, places that they can feel screened off, where they can have secrets with their friends. That sort of thing is really important as well. And it doesn't have to take huge changes in how you run your site. So, next slide, please. And here's some different pictures that we found, just again to give you a sense of the many forms that risky play can take when children are able to decide for it themselves. And what's interesting too is that some of these things will have felt risky to some of the children, and some of them not at all. It's really, you can't always tell from the outside, but sometimes you can, and you can see how it's not just the internal feeling of taking risks. It's also, you know, the chance to show off, like with this kid leaping. It's the chance to be close with a friend, like the two in a tree. It's a chance to make a new friendship, like the two who are sword fighting. It's risky play is very often tied in with something else too, which is another reason why we want to be quite deliberate about how we interact with it, to really support children in gaining the full experiences of their own play. So, next slide, please. But then there's how do we manage all this? And I just want to be very clear again that even while we're talking about how great risks are for children, we're never encouraging people to be negligent. We take children's safety very, very seriously. But at the same time, we accept that safety isn't an absolute, and that some forms of injury, you know, bumps and the occasional bruise and, you know, the scraped knee, that these are part of childhood, and that they are acceptable, I think, or that they can be. This is something that every setting needs to decide for itself, what the level of acceptable risk might be. But we're not encouraging anybody to go beyond that, to put children in danger of actual harm. But what we do say is that often the very serious injuries are far less likely than you might imagine, and that we can use what we learned from the observation of children to get a clear sense of what that likelihood is. I mean, tree climbing is banned at so many different settings, but children actually fall out of trees comparatively rarely. I've only, in 8, 9, goodness, years in this field, I've only seen one child fall out of a tree, and that's because his mum came up early and started shouting at him to get down. So children are far more capable often than we imagine that they are. And if we are deliberate and we do start allowing some risks, they can astound us with their capabilities. Next slide, please. And this conversation about the likelihood and the benefits and how we navigate that, those are called risk-benefit assessments. And there's some more information on that at the end of this presentation. And you can also Google risk-benefit assessments and playwork, because playwork has spent decades thinking about this stuff. And there's a formula as well that you can use, and all sorts of spreadsheets to really build a solid foundation of paperwork underneath these decisions and to help you through the process, because it can seem counterintuitive to a lot of people, and as going against this really predominant narrative that we have at the moment of, all risk is bad, and which in and of itself I think is quite a dangerous position to hold, because that puts an impossible weight on the staff. And it neglects how much good can happen from this, right? How many extraordinary experiences children can create for themselves, and how much they can grow. So, yeah, a big part of it, though, is recognizing what you know already and using that as the foundation for your risk-benefit assessments. You know these children in ways, let's be honest, that even their own parents might not. And if you're parents, you definitely know these children in ways that their teachers and other caregivers might not. So use that knowledge of the children to inform any decisions that you make. But at the same time, children change moment to moment. So we need to also give them the chance to surprise us. And the same can be true with the setting. You know the landscape that you manage very well, but as soon as you bring in some more opportunities, children are going to do things with it that you never expected. So supporting risky play is great for the children, but also really great for us, because we are learning so much all the time. So next slide, please. And whenever people ask about how to start incorporating risky play, or how to start supporting it, I really want to emphasize that you start small. It can be really frightening at first for the adults to reorient their thinking around this stuff. And if you go too big, then what tends to happen is that staff will bring out something that's new and then guard it mercilessly, and children pick up on that fear, and then everyone's anxious and staring at each other, and it's just, it just doesn't work. So instead, start with really small changes that the children will notice and be curious about, but that whatever they do with, it's not going to frighten you. So a great example for this might be, so many children want to do sword fighting, right? Because sword fighting is great. And they'll pick up sticks and wave them around. And the first thing that most adults think is that somebody will lose an eye. A way to say yes if to that, to mitigate the risks but allow children to have this idea, is to replace those sticks with pool noodles. Just like the big, foamy, ridiculous, brightly colored dollar store foam noodles. That gives children the chance to have a sword fight, to chase each other and run and hit and play, but I don't think anybody has ever lost an eye to a pool noodle. Whatever new opportunity or material you bring in, I also want you to recognize that that children are going to go at it quite hard at the beginning, especially if it's an opportunity that they haven't really seen before, or they're not sure if it's going to stick around or if it's ever going to come back. It takes time as well to build trust among the children and between you and the children that these changes are real. So start small, notice how they're behaving with it, and then slowly grow together as you and them gain all of these new skills or remember old ones. Every so often I'll see a colleague up a tree, and I'm always really pleased. Next slide, please. And so whenever we're talking about risk, people tend to focus on the kids that go really hard at these things, right? The children that frighten us. But there are also the children who seemingly have no interest in risk, who are really risk averse. And I think we need to honor them as potentially being the bravest children of all. Because if you think that everything is terrifying for somebody, then everything that they do displays an extraordinary bravery. And these kids, it can often fall on us, I think, to be really gentle with them and to help them do what they want to do, even if it seems small, even if it seems repetitive, because I think that helps them build the bravery that then lets them take whatever risks are for them, whether that's climbing up to a certain height, or talking with other children, or whatever it is that they want to be. Once we start tuning into these children and what they're doing daily and why and what the variations are, then we'll get a sense for them of what's important and what feels scary and how we can help. Okay, next slide. There are some children who can't seem to self-regulate, who seem to conduct their own risk-benefit assessments, but perhaps are happy to accept a level of injury for themselves that we cannot accept on their behalf, if that makes sense. Children who don't seem to care at all whether they break a limb. And that can come from lots of different places, so we don't want to pathologize that. But at the same time, we need to watch them quite carefully. And one of the ways that we can do that is to be a play buddy. So if we have a little one who wants to wrestle really hard, but does it in a way that the other children can no longer tolerate or are no longer interested in, then we can offer up ourselves. We can, if they're sword fighting, we can tap their stick with ours. If they want to wrestle, we can wrestle. Because we are very often much bigger than them, we have more scope to contain that, to contain this huge drive that they have. But when you've got children on site who can't seem to self-regulate very well, or who are still practicing that, you need to really think about the materials that you bring too, and think to yourself, if this was thrown at me, would it hurt? Because not just to avoid the potential dangers of that material, but to really embrace the freedom around it. There's something great for these children specifically who go through their whole life being told, no, stop, go easy, be nice, like a constant refrain around them, to be in a place where they don't hear that, where they are trusted. So the materials that you choose can really help. Bringing a lot of fabric instead, so they can wrap themselves up tightly and get that deep compression feeling, for example. Okay, next slide. So the question that usually comes right after questions about liability is, but what about the parents? And it's true that parental fear can be a huge barrier to risky play for children. And I think for previous generations, that's why children snuck off to somewhere that their mum wasn't watching. So I don't know if this has necessarily changed from previous generations so much, or if it's just that there are fewer opportunities for children to go somewhere their moms not watching. But one of the things that we found to be really effective in the past is to help that parent dig back into their own childhood memories, to remember what they used to get up to. Especially those memories that are maybe a little bit mischievous. If you can find a way to help them re-experience that in conversation with you, then that will really help. It can also help sometimes to frame what their child is doing as competent, to tell stories about what they've accomplished and what they've achieved and how impressive that is developmentally, if be what the parents are concerned about, or just in terms of who they are as an individual. And it can also really help to have material at hand about the benefits of play, especially considering what that specific parent might be worried about, whether it's educational development or resiliency or social connection. You can find the information that links opportunities for risk with those benefits. Okay, next slide, please. So I don't know if you can tell, but I am not from North Carolina, even though I do live in the US. So I can't speak with any great eloquence to the North Carolina policies, but Be Active Kids can, and they are a fantastic resource for anybody local to North Carolina. At the same time, I think a lot of these things are very standard and will be familiar for people looking at outdoor learning environments anywhere around the US, and also quite far beyond the US as well. These things can all be managed and worked around in an environment that still allows for risky play. You just need to be a bit creative. So, next slide, please. There's so much further reading and resources to help you gain the skills and background knowledge and to encourage your creative thinking around the barriers of your own setting, to really support the children that you work with in their own way and their own time in playing in these extraordinary ways. And here's some of them. They're all really helpful. Managing Risk and Play Provision. Tim Gill, one of the authors, also wrote a book called No Fear, which is another great resource. The Playworker's Guide to Risk has lots of templates for risk-benefit assessments, and Play Wales is producing quality work on risk for years. So dig in and keep looking. And then next slide. And then as you do that with these various resources and more readings and this mix of academic and popular texts, then please do stay in touch with us as well. We love answering questions and hearing stories, so please don't hesitate to use the information on the next slide. Thank you very much. And yeah, I hope that this has been useful for you and that you find elements to take with you into your own setting. And when you do, please get in touch with us and tell us how it goes. Thank you very much.
Morgan, again, we thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Obviously, keep up the great work, and we would love everybody to connect with you at popupadventureplay.org and kind of learn what's going on across the world, right, Morgan?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working, we're based in the US and the UK, but we work with grassroots organizers in I think 17 different countries now.
So again, thank you, and continue to look forward to other play webinars from Be Active Kids with some other great speakers. Also take a look at Adventure Play, which is very similar to Risky Play. And we look forward to hearing from you again, Morgan.
Thank you very much.